In this video, I've got two sets of speakers, two receivers, one I didn't even know existed, and I've got a couple turntables. It's going to be a lot of fun. These are some of the really rare pieces that have come through the doors in the last couple months. I set them aside, I make a video, it's going to be fun. Here we go. And this video is brought to you by skylabsaudio.com. Lots of vinyl records, t-shirts, slip mats, products by Grado, Advanced Paris, Wharfdale, and many others. Head over to Skylabs Audio. We appreciate you supporting the channel and our local small business. Thank you. Bang Olufsen speakers. And it's no secret to a lot of people out there that I'm not the biggest fan of Bang Olufsen products. However, I love their speakers. There's not many speakers from Bang & Olufsen I haven't heard. I think as an overall statement about how Bang & Olufsen speakers sound, I do agree they're maybe a little bit extra detailed. Some people might not like that, but I do. And maybe that's from hearing damage, but I don't really think so. When I was younger, I liked detailed speakers then too. It's not that I don't like more neutral speakers, but I like the excitement and the extra detail I get from speakers that are maybe a little bit top heavy. You know, that doesn't mean I like them shrill, but I'm not a big fan of boring neutral speakers. And these are definitely a little bit exaggerated on the top. Keep that in mind if you're looking for a vintage set of speakers. If you would like a more neutral sound, you don't want the exaggerated highs or maybe the extra detail, I would definitely listen to Bang & Olufsen's before you buy them. They are anything but neutral. And these are the 4703s. They just came in a couple weeks ago. I had never heard them. I didn't know they existed. I knew I was going to like them. Another interesting thing about these speakers, they have magnets holding the grills on. They've got to be the strongest magnets on a speaker that I've ever seen. I mean, you feel like you're going to break them taking these things off. You can't get them with your fingernails. You have to use a screwdriver, and unfortunately you kind of take a risk of digging into this really nice aluminum trim. I'm going to grab my grill cover removal tool. My God, I can't get that out. I'm going to grab my grill cover removal tool. That was the fifth time I tried that at least, and I'll take these off and we'll take a look. And if I haven't shown you these before, I got these on Amazon, I think. It's a kit for removing door panels in cars. But it comes with like 6 of these with different sizes and hooks and whatnot. But they do a good job of doing that. It's a 3-way design. Both woofers are active. They both have magnets. One of them's not a radiator or passive. You've got a mid-range, which we did refoam. That's right. I forgot. The mid-range rots and a tweeter. And then you got the world's strongest magnets right here. I mean, it's crazy how strong these magnets are. These were made between 1972 and 1975. They are 4 ohms, so keep that in mind. If you're wanting to add a set of speakers to your existing stereo, these are not going to be a good option for you. 4 ohms, sound great. The basses, they remind me of, I think it's an S-75. I mean, all the Bang & Olufsen speakers are kind of voiced the same way. I don't think there's a big difference between the different models as far as sound quality goes. These sound like the S-75s or the S-45s with more bass. That's the best way I can describe it. Just a little bit deeper, a little bit fuller. Originally, these just had like 40 feet of wire coming out of a hole on the back of these. And on the end of that would be the connector for Bang & Olufsen. It made it really easy for people that didn't really know how to hook up a stereo. There was a connector on the back, and then on the amplifier, it said speaker, and you just plugged it in and it was done. And for that reason, I get it. It made setting up a complete Bang & Olufsen system super easy. And most likely, like Bose and everybody else that did proprietary cables, they kind of forced you to stay in the Bang & Olufsen family. You know, you ended up buying the turntable, you bought the amplifier, you bought the speakers, maybe a tape deck, because it just plugged in super easy. The problem was, if you wanted Bang & Olufsen speakers and you wanted to use them with a Pioneer, you'd either have to cut that end off or you'd have to get adapters. And it just made it a problem, and it's even more of a problem today, especially for turntables and amplifiers and stuff like that, where you're having to use their pigtails or their connectors and modify them. we usually just end up putting on these binding posts and just ending that problem. For any of you out there that are looking for, a fun speaker, definitely check out Bang & Olufsen. Really, any of the 70s speakers from Bang & Olufsen they're a lot of fun. They're fun to listen to, and they're built really well. Besides the crossover networks, which you don't see them, so they don't pretty them up at all. I think the finishes on these are great. This is a real wood veneer. It's got that nice aluminum trim piece. I just don't really know of anything I would complain about if these were mine and in my house. I'd be totally happy with that. Let's do the next set of speakers. I've noticed it doesn't seem like you all really like turntables all that much, so I'll put those at the end. Anytime we do a video on turntables, not a lot of people watch them, so I'm going to do the speakers next, the next set. You would think these would be heavier, but they're not. I've got an interesting story with these. A guy brought these down. He's a viewer of the channel. He was wanting to sell them, and I wasn't interested. These are Utah speakers, made in Utah, at least originally. I passed on them, and he ended up saying, just keep them. You can, I'll donate them, which is really cool because I'm able to do a video on them, having them here. So thank you. With that said, I will say that this is the worst sounding speaker I think I've ever heard with this quality of a cabinet. I've definitely heard worse speakers, but when I opened this up, it kind of became apparent. Now, Utah was kind of known for making speaker drivers. They also made a lot of wall hanging speaker enclosures or 70-volt speakers that would be in like Yonkers or Sears back in the day. They'd be in-ceiling speakers that would play music all day long. They did their job. I'm not bagging on them. This, however, it's pretty bad. This is the HS1C. It's an 8-ohm speaker. It's a 3-way. It's ported, and it has a horn in it. And it's not that the horn sounds bad. Actually, the horn is really, it's borderline not even there. This might have something to do with the crossover network, which is pretty much non-existent. There's actually one capacitor and 2 resistors inside of this cabinet. That's all the crossover network consists of. It is about as bare bones gets as far as the design of this thing. The cabinet is great. I think somebody should get these, take the drivers out, and make a project out of it. I'm going to reach out to some of my friends that like speaker building, and I'm just going to give them away. I'm just going to pass them along. They were given to me, so I'm just going to give them to somebody else. Just keep the karma rolling, that type of thing. I had heard a couple of pairs of Utah speakers before, not this specific model, and I wasn't impressed with those either. And that's why I wasn't interested in buying them when they were for sale. That doesn't mean that there's not good ones out there. I'm just not familiar with them. And on the back of here, it does say Huntington, Indiana. I looked up a brief little bit about this company, and I know they moved around quite a bit. They tried different things. I think even Lansing was involved with this company at one point somehow. And I'm not sure on that. The internet. The other odd thing about these, they've got insulation on one of the side walls and the bottom. And that's it. I don't know how they came up with that configuration. I don't see how 2 more pieces of insulation would add that much as far as cost goes, but that's what they did. These have a great vintage look. Just don't buy them until you hear them. And if you hear them and you like them, forget what I said anyway. It doesn't matter. Or pick them up as a restoration project. It might be fun to grab some newer drivers, put them in there, and see what you come up with. Take a gamble. Might be fun. And the next one I got for you is the Technics SA-5270. And now, they're not the most rare thing on the planet, but they're not coming around that often anymore. We see maybe 1 or 2 a year. These little Technics receivers they're awesome. This thing was working when we got it with no service at all. We went ahead and did the power supply filter caps, cleaned it all out. It was a little bit staticky. Any amplifier receiver, I don't care how much it costs from the 70s, it's going to have staticky controls until they get cleaned. And that was the only issue that this one had. So you can't bag on the build quality for these. They did cut corners. they were a little bit cheaper than the Pioneers and the Yamaha. So they have to hit that price point somehow. This is one of those that has the fiberboard bottom on it. It's not the end of the world. It's just not as much protection as a piece of metal. You know how this stuff, if it gets moisture, goes from hot to cold, it starts to expand a little bit. It kind of breaks down. You don't have that issue as much with metal. This is one of those ways that they were able to keep the cost down, because I think they were like, 20, $40 cheaper than the bigger brands when these were brand new. These came out in 1978. They're 35 watts per channel, which is plenty of power for most people, including myself. It's got the same ins and outs, the same functions as Pioneer, Sansui, and Marantz. It's just not built maybe to that standard. It's still not bad. You can't bag on it. Like I say, it was working unserviced even after being 45 years old. I mean, this thing way outlived its intended use life. There's no question. And the nice thing about these, when you do find them in good shape, they're undervalued in comparison to those other brands. You can pick up a decent 35 watt per channel Technics receiver like this, $200-300, unserviced, working. That's a pretty good deal. And as far as their sound signature goes, it's kind of right down the middle. I don't think it's not neutral, that's for sure, but it's not really overly exaggerated either. They're great little receivers. If you've got a pair of speakers that are reasonably sensitive, you can get the cops called on you with one of these, no problem. Don't overlook the Technics receivers. They sound really good. Yeah, it's cool. I like it. She's a beaut, Clark.
It's a beaut, Clark.
Now this one I didn't know existed. I actually didn't even know CBS or Columbia made receivers. It says Masterworks on it, and it's got the CBS logo there on the front. And this was part of an all-in-one system, came with speakers and a turntable. They kind of used that recognizable badge that you would see on vinyl records back in the day, just for brand recognition if somebody was going to grab their kid or somebody their first stereo, because I think that's maybe what these were intended as. This was definitely built to a price point as well. It's not the most quality thing ever in the world, but that's not what it was intended for. And again, this one worked as well. No service. You could tell no caps have been changed. It's original as original gets. The only thing we did was clean the controls and install one LED right there, because that's all it has. It has one lamp. So it's not going to win any beauty awards, but it sounds pretty good. I'm not going to lie. It sounded great. I think if you were blindfolded, we put this next to a low wattage Pioneer, I think you might be impressed. And this is the M4800. This was manufactured in 1969. And I'm thinking it's probably 5 to 10 watts. I couldn't find the exact numbers on it. But when you take this out of the cabinet, it almost looks identical to a lot of the console stereos, big wood furniture pieces. I've been in enough of those to know what those amplifiers and receivers look like, and it almost looks the same. It's almost like they were building consoles and they said, hey, let's take one of those and put it in a receiver cabinet, and we'll sell it with a couple speakers for those that don't want a furniture piece, because it's got the same mounting style and everything else as a console stereo. And again, you can tell you've got a wood bottom. It's not metal. This was interesting. It's not called volume on this. The on-off switch is connected to the loudness. And that's another thing that makes me think of a console. A lot of times they weren't called volume. They were called loudness. So you turn that on, and that's your volume. It's not a variable loudness knob. Got your basic phono, AM, FM, tape, balance, bass, treble. That's it. Headphone jack. Pretty simple. Pretty straightforward. On the back, you've got your RCA style speaker jacks, which real common with the all-in-one systems where the speakers came with the receiver. It would just have an RCA plug on the back, pop it in, done. Almost like a Bang Olufsen. You got your phono in, you've got tape in, and you've got AM, FM antenna. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if this is a ceramic cartridge input. I don't know that for sure. Most of those consoles had a ceramic cartridge in them, and they were usually higher output. And this thing is in crazy good condition too. You have to think this was a cheap unit when they bought it new. And somebody really cared for it, you know, that it's lasted this long. This thing is 53 years old and it's still in really good shape. You know, for like a garage, perfect. Or maybe even a little bedroom stereo. This would be great. Not bagging on it. Sounded really good. Been working over 53 years. Can't bag on it. Can't do it. This is the Technics SL-1710, and we won't spend a lot of time on it because it's really just an SL-1700 that's dark gray instead of the light gray. And I think this was a European model as well. It always seems to be that way. It's like the Pioneer PL518X. This is just the European version of the SL-1700. But like everything else, you know, I do prefer the looks of these. I don't know if it's the rarity. I don't know if it's because it's a different color than what I'm used to seeing. I really don't know, because it is just a 1700, which is a great table on its own. You add a little bit of rarity to it, you give it a color variant, and all of a sudden my eyes just go, I want that.
I want that.
And one interesting thing about, you know, this era of turntables is they say this is an automatic turntable. And I think anymore today, it's pretty common that this would be considered a semi-automatic. The tone arm does not automatically go over and place itself on the record. This is an auto return turntable or semi-automatic, not automatic. It's got all the great techniques, build quality. I mean, this thing is heavy. It's stout. They work great. Direct drive, great tone arm, great build quality. It's in good shape. I love it. It's cool. If you see one, you should get it. This is the Harman Kardon T35C. It is one of my favorite turntables. It really is. I love these things. And one of the best things about this turntable really is it's auto stop. That is my favorite version of auto return or automatic function. That's the only thing I need. I've got to go over and put the record on anyway, so I don't mind bringing the tone arm over. But at the end of the record, what it does is it kicks up the tone arm, shuts the platter off, and it's good. So there's not a lot of gears bringing the tone arm back. It's just essentially a lift. And that's all I need. That's all I needed to do. This is a belt drive from 1983, and you can see the amount of suspension this thing has on it. For anybody out there that's had trouble with turntables in their house, like myself, you know, my living room, if I have the wrong turntable in there, I have to tiptoe around that thing. Otherwise, it starts mistracking or jumping the groove. So I have to walk really quiet, really soft up to the turntable, and I feel like there's a baby in the room or something. But this definitely does help mitigate that. The other interesting thing about this era of Harman Kardon, I think it was a 65C, you know, a couple levels up. And it had the original record weight, and they called it a record stabilizer. But I had no idea that stabilizers had been around that long. I kind of thought the record weights were a new thing, early 2000s. But I just didn't know. And this one didn't have the weight with it or the stabilizer. I looked on eBay just to see if there were any available, and I think they're kind of unicorns at this point. So if you have a Harman Kardon turntable and you have the original record stabilizer, hang on to that. I mean, it might be more valuable than the turntable you're using it on, honestly. And the platter on this is decent. Nothing about the Harman Kardon turntables seemed budget to me. I mean, I really feel like they made some really good turntables in this era. I've had quite a few. I'd be happy with this turntable forever. And if for some crazy chance, anybody out there that designs turntables, bring back the auto stop function. We need more auto stop. Right now, Audio-Technica has a new one. I think it's the LP8, and a few Fluence turntables have that auto stop. But that's a great feature. It's just peace of mind walking away from it, knowing it doesn't matter. It's going to shut itself off and I don't have to worry about it. Peace of mind. Pretty awesome. Kicks ass. And if you like this video, definitely watch this one. Also, don't forget to subscribe. It's cheap. It's actually free. Thanks.